It is so much fun to be with Sevilla again today. The last time we saw each other was at Chino at the conference at Quest for a Spiritual Home. And we're just eager to get together and talk about our experiences there. And Sevilla, I was kind of hoping that you could jumpstart this and just talk about what it was like for you. I mean, you had a long way to fly in because you came all the way
Yeah,
from DC, right?
yeah, yeah, that's right. Yeah, so yeah, it was a great experience. I mean, let me compare it a little bit to, it was a different vibe from Thunder Bay, where things were sort of just getting started. But I certainly noticed,
For the people who are tuning in who don't know
oh
anything
yeah,
about this, okay?
yeah,
So Thunder Bay, Ontario was the location for a previous
yeah,
conference.
and that was in September, and I think I've got the thing from the bag from that. It's right here. That was called Conscious and Consciousness. And they gave out this bag with the
Oh,
pictures of,
very cool.
and
So
that was
those
actually
so that's let's see, that's John Vervaeke,
here.
Jonathan Peugeot, and
Yeah.
then going
Paul
around.
Vanderplay, and this is, I don't remember his name, unfortunately, but it was the doctor from the local university
Uh-huh.
who, cognitive psychologist, I think. And so he
Okay.
was fourth, kind of like John Van Donk was the fourth this time.
And so it was just part of sort of this little corner getting
Yeah.
together and trying to figure things out the way we've been trying to figure things out online for the last 4 years.
And so that was, and this one was very similar. Catherine organized it in pretty much the same way and had the fourth person, so you could have the two split off dialogues and then all four talking together. And it was, that was interesting the way they did that. It worked well in both cases, very different in both cases. But what I noticed in Chino is, you certainly had a lot of young men coming together looking for, I guess, um, not so much, not so much of the Jordan Peterson thing where, I mean, there's a similarity where they've lost in the world because of the way men are being treated lately, and Jordan Peterson has given them confidence and tools to get back in the world in a meaningful and proper way. So there was that, to the extent that the whole spirituality aspect, the whole and mostly these guys are Christians, so a lot of young guys coming to Christianity or have been Christian and trying to figure it out, what way they're going to go with it. Are they going to do the church of their youth? Are they going to move on to some other denomination? Are they going to go Orthodox like a lot of these guys are doing? Or did they, did they ditch it and then get back into it? And that was sort of happening in Thunder Bay. I noticed that, but really I noticed this in Chino, where the young men, and I guess maybe it's because of the estuary that really brought it front and center, is you got, these up close and personal expositions of people's quests, which is which is exactly what the whole Chino conference was about, was that
Well,
quest.
okay, so in Thunder Bay, then are you saying that you didn't have the estuary experiences in Thunder Bay?
They did. It just wasn't emphasized the way it was here, where everyone did it. You could do it. Paul offered it like as a sideline one night, but
Oh, okay.
this one it was really emphasized, and everyone did it, and everyone did it every day.
Yeah, I was
That
trying
was
to
the
remember.
big
It seems to
difference.
me
Yeah.
we had like 3 sessions the first
Mhm.
day and then one session the last day.
Well, I think we ended up. I mean, I think I had to miss one for some reason, but yeah, there was something like that. So that was the big difference, and so you really got to hear what these guys, mostly young men, were, not exclusively, obviously, we were there. But and actually that's the other demographic I noticed is women our age. Probably that was the second biggest demographic.
Yeah, is that what is that? Why do you think that is? I mean, there were some young women there. there were some young women there,
Yeah.
and I kind of noticed that among the young women, the demographic was that they were either in tech or they were artists,
Yeah, yeah, that's right. That's very true.
which is I just it's very interesting.
Well, a lot of what happened this time, and that this was another big difference too, is you got people flying in, but you had so many people that were local in both situations. So you had a lot more Canadians in Thunder Bay, and you had a ton of people from Southern California at this one, which makes sense.
Hmm.
So I think the tech and the artistic part might have been that.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah. And then there were some couples. That was kind of
Sure.
surprising to
Yeah.
me because it seems like what I hear from people, and that's certainly my own experience too, that it's usually only one member of a couple that is kind of into this thing, and the other one
Yeah.
can't figure out
Yeah.
why are you into this thing? What does this all mean, you know? So yeah, so starting from the beginning, when you got there, you said you did you notice right away that there was a different vibe, and what was the difference in the vibe?
Well, I mean, the churches were very different for one. I mean, you really like in Thunder Bay, it's sort of a humble church that sort of just got started. Um, and it was this kind of one room church that was associated. What really stood out there was they had this fantastic coffee shop, and that's how they did their, that's what financed a lot of it, I think.
Hmm.
They were more focused on, reaching out to the Thunder Bay's very economically is not very successful economically, and there are a lot of social services around, and a lot of people you see around there you can tell are not, are kind of down and out.
Hmm.
So that church really served that community, whereas this church, was really, it was kind of fancy, and I had never been to anything like that actually.
Well, it was sort of like a campus almost because
Mhm. It's like, yeah,
they had their main building and then they had some other buildings that were for like educational purposes and um, preschool and maybe even, yeah, maybe even like a community building or something like
yeah,
that. It was more like a campus.
yeah, that's right. And that's the big, that was an obvious big difference.
Hmm. Well, so I mean, I'm very familiar with churches like that because they're kind of all over the place.
Mhm.
And um, there are fewer, maybe, of the kind of church that you're talking about in Thunder Bay, um, partly because Thunder Bay has its own vibe. Like you said,
Yeah,
it's more of a economically distressed
yeah,
area, and
very, yeah,
so
which is
so the
really
churches
obvious.
there would naturally be more focused on that.
Yeah,
Although, I'm sure that the church that we were at in Southern California would be pretty similar to the church that I'm at, which is not anything like the size of that Chino campus, but very outward focused, doing a
mhm,
lot of community services kind of things, but it's not as obvious because when you look at
yeah,
the church building, it's a little bit more substantial.
yeah. Oh,
The
no doubt. I mean, we even saw that they, have these programs for the poor there and in other countries. So I
Mhm.
thought that that church really does a lot. But it was just like its obvious role of the other church was serving, the community, and they'd have dementia patients come in. Um, it was, I don't know if it was weekly or daily. It might have been weekly. And everything sort of centered around the free lunch that they had in the basement for the community and the coffee shop, which was
Mhm.
public at large. But this was really, I mean, a totally different vibe church wise.
Mhm.
And that was my first experience with a church like that. I've been to the Episcopal Church, I've been to the Catholic Church, and because of social work, I've been to the urban Baptist churches. But I had never been to anything like that.
Yeah. Well,
Like
one
a
of the
church.
things that I thought was really fun and kind of fascinating was that the local people of the church were the ones who did all the serving at mealtime
Mhm.
and everything
Yeah.
and took care of keeping all the rooms ready for us and
Mhm.
cleaning up afterwards at the end of the day, and that was really interesting to me because almost every other conference I've been at, or like I've been to some like training programs that go on for weeks at a time, and typically the participants are the ones that part of the program is that the participants take responsibility for their own care,
Yeah. Yeah.
serving themselves at meals and cleaning up together afterwards. And that's sort of team building in a way
Yeah.
when you do that.
That makes
But
sense.
here we were free to think and process and talk. We didn't have to take care of any details. And so
Yeah.
that was pretty nice.
Yeah, it was. And what else was, well, I guess what more about that situation? Well, I mean, I think these, like you really saw because this channel that's developed in between, maybe before Thunder Bay, but I'm not sure, and you had a couple of the guys on your, you've had three of them lately. You had Chad, and you had Teo, and then you had a third fellow who I didn't get a chance to see that one.
Ted
Ted, that's it. Yeah.
and then Justin.
And
Maybe
Justin.
Justin hasn't published yet. That's going to publish in a
Yeah.
couple of days.
Yeah, but Justin's been getting involved too, so that's great.
Yeah.
It's a lot more of him lately. But that, like that group that sort of, I guess it's the Bridges of Meaning Discord where they came from, but they have their own channel where they do something every Friday.
Oh, really?
It's called the Friday Morning Nameless.
Oh, that's Chad's channel.
Oh, is that Chad's channel?
Yeah. Yeah. So
Okay.
he's getting more. That's
Yeah,
great
yeah.
that he's doing more stuff. Cool.
For some reason I thought Jacob was doing that, but Jacob's got his own channel too. So I noticed a lot more of that, vibe there, those guys and the people who went on their channels and kind of circulated around those channels.
Mm-hmm.
And that really set the tone there, I think.
I think Jacob's channel is called Just Chatting, maybe, or
Yeah.
okay.
Or his last name, Facciaracci.
Yeah. 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 So how did it feel to you meeting people in person that you had only seen online before?
Well, I got, with the regular, with John and Paul and Jonathan, I'd already been through that. So it was great to see them again. But it was really like meeting Grim Grizz was great.
Yeah.
That was interesting to see him in person. Because he's he's got such uh, he's a strong presence.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. He's definitely a strong presence, strong personality, and kind of a center. People gather around him. So he's got a kind of a natural leadership
I
quality
think
about him.
right. He
Yeah.
absolutely does. And just being so brilliant and also that whole the way he characterized himself as the wise fool of the corner, I think is and symbolically I think that is his role. The person who points out all the undercurrents in what's going on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you taught a class. Well,
Oh, Jacob did that. That was really great. He just kind of made it happen, out of the blue. There was very old psychiatrist who was a member of that church, and he's in his 90s, and he's a friend of John Van Dongen's. So Jacob, and there was several mental health practitioners there. Probably there could have been more involved because there was a couple of VA psychiatrists and a couple other therapists, but he just did it ad hoc. He knew that I was a therapist, so he just got us together on stage, for like Ken Lowry, sort of as a facilitator, and then me and the psychiatrist whose name eludes me, and then John Von Dock. And so we just sort of talked about our roles as practitioners and what mental health, you know, what the practice of how the concept of practicing and maintaining good mental health is in relation to also the spiritual quest, because it is part of it.
Mm-hmm. Well, so what kind of things did you talk about in there? Because I didn't get to see that. I was in the main hall when that happened.
Paul posted it. I can send you a link. It was short. It was only maybe half an hour. And basically, the psychiatrist and I talked about our practice experience. His was, you know, he's 90, so he obviously was a psychoanalyst, because all therapists were psychoanalysts up to some point in the 20th century. That's how it's done, and mostly it was psychiatrists who were psychoanalysts.
Well, so that's an interesting question for me. What is the difference now then between a therapist and a psychoanalyst?
Well, psychoanalysts in the past, you know, you'd go there 4 or 5 days a week, and you just kind of free associate, and every now and then someone, you know, the psychiatrist will interject or notice something about what you're talking about and draw your attention to something you probably haven't noticed before. And, you know, days and days and days of this, and often over the course of years. That's how it was practiced back in the, you know, sometimes you see these movies in the 70s, like Woody Allen, and they're going to their analyst. So
Uh-huh.
that's what it was. But psychotherapy, you know, started switching um, at some point in the 20th century to, you know, all the forms we see nowadays. And that's just once a week for the most part. So
And
that's
and the forms we see nowadays would be like
well, you have things.
cognitive behavioral
Yeah,
therapy and
yeah,
dialectical behavioral therapy
that's
and
right.
EMDR
Mhm.
and all of these various things. So do you practice a particular vein of that, or is it like you target it towards your client, or how does that work?
Well, my postgraduate, not after graduate school, I did another 2 year long program in something called psychodynamic psychotherapy, which is it's a modern form of psychoanalysis to some degree. It draws from those concepts in that school. But you know, I know some basic CBT concepts. I mean, every therapist does, because some
Mhm.
of that stuff is a really good tool. And so most of us do something else. We do other interventions, and then people will practice, you know, they'll go get a certificate in interventions, sort of layer them onto what they do. And nowadays people don't, you know, people seem to want, because of TikTok and stuff, people seem to want things like EMDR or um, things that seem to be short term and effective in a short term.
Like rapid response therapy, RRT, is that correct? Is that the right?
I've never heard that particular. Um,
Well, there's some sort of new thing where sometimes they can get the result within 1 or 2 sessions and then you're done.
yeah, I would find that hard to
Well, I mean, I've talked to some people who've gone through it and they said it was completely remarkable
Right.
because something um it's probably a compression of the psychoanalytical thing where the person is talking and somehow the therapist is able to get them targeted in on whatever the
Yeah.
significant thing was in their life that created this problem and then
Right.
kind of open that up and yeah, I mean I've heard a couple of really remarkable stories from
Mhm.
people.
What did you hear? Can you share one of the stories?
um yeah, not without revealing too much about the person. Yeah, can't do that.
Well,
But
of course
but
not.
they'd gone through many other different kinds of therapies, which could have had their impact. So I
Sure.
mean,
Yeah, yeah.
right? So they might have been well prepared for this because maybe all the other therapies kind of helped them zone in on what the main problem was. So maybe that allowed this
Uh-huh.
rapid response therapist person to get at the main problem more
Yeah.
swiftly. I don't know what would happen if you just came in Like, I mean, I remember the first time I ever talked to a therapist, I went in there and I was just like, I don't even know where to start. It's such a tangle. It's just all wound up like a big ball of spaghetti. And she just said, just start anywhere. That's my
Yeah.
job.
Yeah, that's right.
Right.
Yeah.
And that was very like, just
Yeah.
put me at ease. Like, like there's this one snake, but it's tied in with all these other snakes. And
Right.
because life is complicated. But maybe most people, after they've lived with this pile of snakes for 40 years, they can kind of figure out what the central snake is. And then you can talk to a therapist about that. And if they can help you unlock how that first thing got
Yeah.
started in you, it can make a lot of sense out of things.
Oh,
So,
yeah. No, that does make sense. And that's a lot of what psychodynamic is about, is getting to the root of the early patterns that are dragging
mhm,
you down. So, I mean, yeah, if someone can find the key, the main, like you said, the main snake, that would be useful in a couple of sessions, sure.
yeah. Well, I remember you saying once that part of your work is to help people uh, develop a coherent worldview for
Yeah,
themselves, right?
yeah,
Could you
yeah.
talk about that a little bit?
Well, I think that is what I talked about in the little panel that we had, is like people cannot differentiate from what they have absorbed from other people, narratives that they've absorbed from other people, and what society tells them, and what they actually believe and feel and think. So it's getting a sense of who someone really is without all the contaminating messages, let's say,
Hmm.
and allowing someone, allowing people to, like people allowing themselves to have the freedom of their true selves versus being trapped by old narratives that other people have put on them, often the parents, and that those narratives seem dangerous to drop until you realize you can drop them.
Hmm. Well, because you have to have some frame, right? So
Absolutely.
so
Yeah.
maybe it is dangerous to drop a frame until you've worked out what your new frame is.
Yeah. No, I think that's right. And move in the direction of your spontaneous expression versus, what's been stifled or waylaid,
Hmm.
redirected by your upbringing,
Hmm.
or even later things that happen.
Yeah, I mean that really makes sense to me because I like almost everybody else, I grew up in a dysfunctional home. And maybe not like everybody else. I was just a fog,
Mm-hmm.
really, until I was probably 30 years old. I mean, I was still doing things, living life, and probably people watching from the outside thought, "Oh, that's a perfectly normal person." I mean, maybe they didn't. I don't. But inside my own head, I had no idea really who I was, or I just sort of fell into things, and then I would do it, whatever it was I fell into, and um, yeah, and so coming out of that fog and trying to figure out who you are is just
Yeah,
it's very complicated.
it is complicated.
Yeah.
And especially if you've got so many unconscious patterns that seem to be reality that you have not yet discerned aren't really you.
Hmm. Yeah, and I mean, I don't know. Does a person ever get completely out of that? Every once in a while I still have thoughts like, am I am I still living in a delusion? You know, a fantasy world. Because most of the time I have this very coherent worldview. And one of the things I do recognize about myself is that, and I didn't come to this recognition until probably 10 years ago. So it's pretty scary. I'm 65 years old when this aha comes to me. Wait a minute. I'm not living according to the values that I say that I have.
Yeah, right.
That's like a terrifying, like, I'm talking about these, I'm talking about my worldview and my values and everything. I don't live those values, really. And so coming to that recognition was a huge aha for me. And I still, there's still areas of my values that I'm not living out. And that's and then I sometimes wonder, is that a normal experience? Can everybody are there people who can 100% live out their values?
Well, I think you'd have to be some kind of ascetic to do that.
Oh, okay.
You know? Because I think that, maybe what you're talking about also is as you develop spiritually, since that's a big part of your life, these values take on more, you have a fuller understanding of what it means. So
Yeah, well, that's true. That's
you
really
may be
true.
thinking you're living up to your values, but your understanding of these values change. So maybe you are living up to these values at one point. Then the what these values mean change as you develop spiritually,
Deeper and deeper,
deeper
deeper
and
levels
deeper and
of it.
deeper.
Yeah.
So that requires you to, reevaluate your behavior.
Yeah.
You were, but that awakening is really awakening to a new self versus that you were bad in the past and now you're.
Yeah. I
So
mean, that's exactly the same as the experience of developing as an artist. It's exactly the same
yeah,
trajectory
totally,
because
totally.
you have a vision of what you want to accomplish and you go after it and then you're done and it's like
Mm.
that did not live up to my vision at all. Well, what do I need in order to live up to that vision? Well, I need to develop this skill, this skill, this skill, this skill. So then I go out and
Right.
I develop those skills and then I try again. Only now my vision has gone a little further on. Now I try that vision and whoops, I'm not there yet. So I have to go develop this skill and this skill and this, and yeah, it's exactly the same. That's
Mhm.
exactly the same paradigm. Thank you. That clears things up. See, you fixed me.
What is a rapid
Rapid
response?
response therapy. Or maybe, no, maybe it's rapid resolution
I'll
therapy.
have to
That
look
makes
that
more
up.
sense.
Yeah, I'll have to look that up.
It's RRT anyway.
Okay, all right,
Yeah.
definitely. I'll see. I mean, maybe that's something I could get out of that for sure.
And I had a conversation with, oh gosh, who is that? Bruce Ecker, who does something called coherence therapy. And I think that verges on this RRT thing
Yeah.
a little bit. So that was a
Okay.
very interesting conversation with him. Some of my viewers had pointed him out to me
When did you do that one?
maybe 2 months ago.
Oh, okay.
Bruce Ecker, some kind of coherent, I can't remember the first word, but it's coherence therapy. And it's something he actually developed.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
And he's written the book about it and he's got a whole organization and everything.
Well, that is the case with a lot of people develop modalities.
So that's what they mean when they say modality.
Yeah, yeah. And there's many of them all over the place now, and some of them are great.
So when you heard Jordan Peterson talking about what he did when he was a clinician,
Uh-huh.
how would you characterize his approach?
Well, I think he was trained in psychoanalysis. He has an interest in Jung, and I think that he
Uh-huh.
he pursued that on his own. But he also does CBT. I mean, like at the basis of a lot of the stuff he talks about is exposure therapy.
Mm-hmm. Is that the root of CBT is exposure therapy?
That's an element. That's something that would fall under that umbrella.
And exposure therapy is when you determine what it is that you're afraid of, and then you move time
Yeah,
little bits towards it in order
that's
to
right.
develop your courage.
Yeah, with a voluntary approach. I mean, you have to want to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Because if
Yeah.
your therapist makes you do it, then that can make it worse.
Yeah. Well, and I mean that's probably where so many of the problems start with parenting because parent doesn't understand how important the voluntary side is in any sort of learning. I mean, you
Yeah,
think you're helping by you know promoting or pushing certain things, but really without the voluntary aspect, then there's no freedom there, there's no learning. So
Now,
yeah,
then the kids just doing it to please their parents.
yeah, yeah.
Oh, the other thing about Jordan Peterson, I forgot, and I mentioned this during the panel. One person and one thing that made me really relate to him is Carl Rogers.
Mhm.
Are you familiar with his approach?
Well, I only from what I've heard from Jordan Peterson, unconditional positive regard.
Yeah, and that's like mirroring back to it's like you as they speak, you repeat back to them in a way what they're saying to the point that you are saying back to them exactly what they are trying to convey to you. And that might, that takes some adjusting, because you can think that you know what they're saying, but when you summarize it back to them, it may be totally wrong. So the therapy in Carl Rogers is getting that right, getting like, and helping them, and by doing this, helping them develop into someone who feels, thinks, and act in the same way, that it lines up in congruence.
Well,
That
yeah, I mean, I can totally get that. I mean, okay, so pop culture, like marriage stuff, which I've gone through some, we've gone through some in the past. They typify that as drive-through communication.
Mhm.
So, like you're going to McDonald's and you say, I want a burger, no pickles, and then I want a protein burger, lettuce wrapped, and then I want a soda and a coffee, black. No, no, make that with cream. And then they come back and they say, you want a protein wrap with no pickles? No, I want a regular burger with no pickles and a protein wrap with, so you get that right then, right? So they call that drive-through communication.
Well, it makes sense. I think it is
Yeah.
based on that.
Yeah. So um, but one of the other things that I noticed is that a lot of times I don't really know what I don't really know how to process what it is I believe until I've talked it through with somebody. So there's
Uh-huh.
something about language that
Yep.
actually builds structure at the same time that so if you're talking with a therapist and they're getting you to say over and over again what it is you really believe, sometimes I hear myself saying it and I think, yeah, I'm saying this, but that's not really what I believe,
That's
right? And
right.
then I'll
That's right.
adjust as I go along
Yeah.
and
That makes
until I can get to what it is that I actually believe. And then by that time, they can also meet up with my mountain and then we're on the same page, right?
that makes a lot of sense.
I mean, is that kind of the thing that you're talking about with Carl Rogers?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that's certainly another way of yeah. I mean, like you were talking about the congruence, you're helping them um, know themselves, like their beliefs, and like you're
Mhm.
saying, in the process of doing this therapy, where what the therapist is trying to understand what you're saying, is trying to really get you. You are also trying to get yourself, because you're trying to convey your true self to the therapist, and
Yeah.
then that attempt to convey yourself, you're adjusting, like you said, until you get what feels right, and then when everything is congruent, that's where they're trying to get to. That's what
Hmm.
type of therapy is trying to get to. And you do it with within the safe space of unconditional positive regard. You're not trying to, you're trying to let the person just be who they are. Because a lot of times kids, when they're little kids, they're not allowed to be angry, and they're not allowed to be who they really are, because it's inconvenient to the parent.
Well, that's part of it is inconvenient, especially if you have to get somewhere, especially if it's something that the kid has to get to because of some,
Well, but not
if
really
they don't
that.
get there, they're not going to end up at Yale or whatever, right?
Well, no, I mean some of that stuff, not so much the logistical stuff, or how to behave in society in some kind of way, so you're not just running around as like a hellion, which some kids are, but like that your anger isn't valid. You shouldn't be angry about this. you shouldn't be upset about that.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, just suppress these emotions because they're not convenient to me because I don't want to see them.
Oh yeah, I mean that kind of thing. I can totally see that. I can see that back in my own parenting
Mhm.
that um because there again, I mean it's like when Jordan Peterson talks about cleaning your room,
Uh-huh.
there's this pile of papers over in the corner that you haven't gone through and put away
Yeah,
yet
yeah, yeah,
because it's a pile of snakes.
yeah,
And so there are just things that are inconvenient to look at the moment that cause people to make, well, I mean, I'll speak for myself, that can cause me to make decisions in the moment that are damaging not only to myself but to other people. And then you look back on it later and you're like, I just can't believe I did that, you know. But that's also part of the problem. Why am I saying I can't believe I did that? That if I wasn't um if I wasn't capable of, if that wasn't if I was capable of never doing anything like that, then I would be perfect, right? And I'm not perfect, obviously. So obviously I've done all kinds of things that um, not only have not exposed my own snakes, but have created snakes for other people. and you know, I'm laughing about it, but it isn't really a funny thing. It's really, in many ways, very tragic, and it's one of the
well,
things we deal with. But I mean, that was one of the things that really spoke to me at Chino is how in the estuary groups, it always felt as though we were all coming at it with unconditioned positive regard
yeah,
and really trying to understand each other.
yeah. So what is your so that's I totally agree. And we were in the same Chino group, so we've got, you know, I know what your, you know, your experience is, or at least I know what it was like to be in the room with you and these people at the same time.
Mhm.
So we've got cross reference. But I'm interested, what is your what's your impression of Chino?
Well,
Like
I was
what
telling Tayo the other day
takeaways?
that my big takeaway was how lovely it was to, I guess what it is that we all have the same foundation because we've all been following the same thread
Yeah.
for a year or 2 years or 4 years,
Yeah.
however long we've been working on whatever it is that we're doing in this little corner. So we all have the same foundation.
Hmm.
It's not that it would be impossible for a new person coming in because a new person could come in and, like, even talking to Tayo, he only got into this a couple of years ago and he caught up pretty fast because he was willing to listen to three or
Yeah,
four
yeah.
hundred hours of video, right? But when you all have the same foundation, then when you come together, you have a certain place where you can start, and then
Mhm.
you can treat each other as if we're all more or less on enough of the same page that we have a place to start in our conversation.
Yeah, that's really true.
And and then the other thing is this assumption of trust that we're just assuming you trust me and I can trust you and we can speak openly because of that.
Yeah.
Um, and you know, I mean, I've thought a lot about trust, and for me, and I don't know how this works for everybody else, but for me, one of the reasons that I can trust is because I'm not trusting so much the other person as I am trusting God, or as Jordan Peterson would say, I'm trusting that being is good, fundamentally good. So I can be open, I can be honest about who I am without fearing utter destruction because I believe God is good, and if he's calling me to be honest, he's going to work things out. Maybe not always with a good consequence. Maybe there's going to be some terrible consequence that comes out of it, but there will be a purpose even in that. And so that is what allows the trust. Now, I don't know what that is for other people.
But it did seem like the trust you're talking about, and the higher purpose that we were all that was guiding us. Really, it really it seemed to resonate there. I mean, that's not very unusual to be in a situation like that,
Mm-hmm.
where people aren't, where there just isn't any negativity, really. I mean, if there's negativity, it's about people saying, I had this painful experience.
Mm-hmm.
But there's nothing like complaining about, you go to conferences that aren't like this, that are for some other thing, some commercial venture, some professional venture, and people will be complaining and they'll be talking about other people, and they'll be talking about the leadership, and there'll be all sorts of things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And there was none of that there.
Yeah, I know.
I know.
Wasn't it lovely?
Yes.
When can we do it again?
I know.
Yeah.
And you didn't see people on their phones nonstop. I mean, they using their phones to look things up, or or share videos or take photos, but you just didn't see what you see in the everyday world. You know what I mean?
Well, and there were many people who had made a commitment to completely get off of social media so that they would have more time to do their life.
Yeah.
Because once they've come to a place where they feel like they have responsibilities in life and they want to carry out those responsibilities. I mean, I just met some lovely people. There was one guy I met, I hope I get a chance to talk to, but he's very busy, obviously, because he has a very responsible life.
Mhm.
But he and his wife um, were one time missionaries. Well, missionaries are a loose word. I'm not exactly sure what their
Yeah,
category would have been, but they were working with abused women in Nepal,
that's right. Yeah.
right? And then he really believed that part of what they should be doing is building a family by adopting children who are um, maybe in the social work system or something where they desperately need a family, and so they specifically moved to Canada so that they could adopt um, abandoned children. It's easier to adopt children, I guess, in Canada, or maybe Canada provides some financial incentive for adoption. Not incentive, but makes it less expensive. Like
Yeah.
in the States, adopting a child can cost way more than having a
Sure.
baby
Sure.
in the hospital.
So they subsidize the adoption of.
Canada subsidizes to some extent the adoption. And so they've already adopted 4 children. They were working on number 5, and they they do little videos once in a while when they get a new child, and then it
Oh,
just
nice.
shows the family. And
Yeah.
I mean it's just lovely. And part what was so cool was because they're very, very busy with all these children and with their work and everything. So they split their their work. He does he does window washing as a job so that he can work in the summer and the fall. Or maybe it's the summer and the fall. And then she has a different kind of business that she can do in the winter and the spring.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
So they can take turns parenting six
Yeah.
months at a
So
time
they're
while the
both
other one
on
is
there.
earning
Yeah.
the money for them. And
Yeah.
I thought this is such a creative way to build a life, right?
Oh, yeah.
And so that they can serve in the way that they feel they're called to serve. But then that makes you very busy. So you don't have time for social media, right?
Yeah.
Because you're actually trying to help raise up people to be new people in our
Yeah.
world that are loved and cared for. And yeah, I met lots of lovely people like that. And
Yeah, I remember him. I don't remember his name, but I was really impressed by that.
yeah, and I heard many other stories, and it's just so great to meet people who, and in many cases now in their case it wasn't, I don't think, but in many cases I met people who had been moved by Jordan Peterson or by John Vervaeke or by Paul Vanderklay to make a difference in their life and to come to a place of responsibility. And it's just very encouraging to see that there is a way that the world can change, because we're attacked relentlessly by the negativity in the media.
Isn't it unbelievable?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where you just feel like the world is, how can this ever, it's so hopeless. How can this ever
Yeah,
change?
it's
That's
so
the message that they're giving us all the time.
it's
and,
profitable.
and at Chino, you see all these people who are making a life and confronting voluntarily the snakes in their life and confronting voluntarily their fears and working in whatever way they personally can to improve their own life and improve the lives of their family members, and then moving outward. It's the whole picture. You start at ground zero and work on that. I'm still looking at this pile of snakes in my office. It's so easy to find excuses and say, well, because I'm busy, I don't have time
Yeah,
to tackle that pile of snakes. But really, it's just a pile of snakes.
yep. Yeah, that's like one of the biggest problems most people have is getting that motivation to do these things we should do to clean up our room.
Well, I mean, I just have to be honest here.
I'm not even going to show you mine. That's snake's light.
That was only half of it. Here's the other half.
There's some
Just
organization.
snakes everywhere.
There's an undercurrent of organization about it.
Yeah, it's well, one of the other things I've noticed happening recently, and this gives me real hope, and I don't know, I have no idea if this goes back to Jordan Peterson or if there's just a current in the air now that things are possible.
Mhm.
But one of the guys I love listening to online is a guy by the name of John Ortberg. He's written many books.
Mhm.
He has a YouTube channel now called Become New.
Mhm.
And he just every day he does a 10 or 15-minute thing. And sometimes he might go through a book, like he went through a book by Dallas Willard and talked about it little by little every day. Right now, he's going through the book of Genesis.
Interesting.
And his message just a couple of days ago was this idea of the snake.
Mhm.
And, what does the snake represent? Was it really a talking serpent, or does it represent this larger entity that we can allow to control our lives? And what is the snake that you're allowing to control you today? He got right at it. And it's obviously Jordan Peterson wasn't the first one to talk about that. You can go back to the church fathers who have been talking about that. But for me, it's something new to hear people in the church using this symbolic language, and using it in a way not I mean, I've heard this before when pastors are trying to bring up an application from a passage.
Mhm.
It was just different in the way he approached it. It just
Yeah.
felt much more like what we talk about in our
Sure.
corner.
Yeah, more
And,
the Stoic approach, right?
and then the message at church on Sunday was one of the young pastors, and he was talking about Noah's Ark.
Mhm.
And the way he taught that was, I would say, pretty close to what Jordan Peterson was doing when he talked about Noah's Ark. And so, I mean, he was still coming at it from a biblical perspective, not a psychological perspective, but he used a lot of the same kind of symbolic ideas. And so to hear that coming from the pulpit
Mhm.
was just very encouraging to think, yeah, so people are trying to find another way to reach this generation that's not watering it down and making it something easy to absorb, but that's making you dig a little bit deeper.
Yeah,
That was very encouraging. It was quite a message.
because you can because you have to sort of have you can't have something so abstract or something so something you can't really get a hold of. And I think that, for me, I think that you know how Jonathan Peugeot says, yes, these stories are real, but they're real in a meta kind of way, and I think that, like, you're not gonna, like, it's not exactly about going and seeing, going back in a time capsule and revisiting these stories and seeing it happen just as it plays out in the Bible. This is something much deeper than that. And I think that if people can see the difference, I think that's what puts people off, is the scientific, like, this is what Jonathan says, the scientific interpretation of the Bible. Like, a lot of the fundamentalist interpretation has a tendency to be a science lens. This actually happened. And if you don't, like, the ultimate truth is scientific. And if you don't agree with the ultimate scientific truth, then that's heretical.
Mhm.
When there's something really, like, heretical in itself by looking at it through a scientific lens.
Well, that has to be because if you go back and I have not read that much of the church fathers, but once in a while I go back and I'm doing some research and I'll look at something. And someone had asked me a question about this Noah's Ark message that I wanted to pursue a little bit, which I thought was a very good question. So I went searching. And I ran into a message that Bishop Barron had done about Origen's
I was going to mention that.
Origen's opinion of Noah's Ark. And when you read Barron's message about Origen's perspective, it reads almost exactly like Jordan Peterson's perspective.
Yeah.
And this is going back into the very early beginnings of the church.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
So, and I mean, Jordan Peterson's perspective on Noah's Ark is not that it happens, it's what always happens. Because what always happens is that when people stop focusing on God and stop looking upward and trying to build their society around this upward, gratitude and humility, they fall into chaos and they're consumed by the flood. And it happens every time. And like Jordan Peterson was teaching, he talked about Soviet Union, he talked about Nazi Germany, he talked about Mao's China, that when it came to a place where the people were no longer courageous enough to speak the truth or to stand for truth, the whole society collapses and they are subsumed by the flood.
Yeah.
And it's not that the flood comes as a punishment, the flood comes as an inevitable consequence of the behavior. And that's true even in the little floods in our lives.
That's right. Yeah.
Right. So, one of the things I struggle with is trying to maintain a healthy weight, because food is a convenient fix for things, just like anything else. And so God's not punishing me with not being able to go out and buy pretty clothes. It's an inevitable consequence, And the other thing is, our bodies are built with a certain frame and bone structure that is built to manage a certain amount of weight, and it's physics. It's just physics. So if you are abusing that balance by carrying too much weight, it's going to have a physical impact on your body. It's going to. It's not like somebody is punishing you with having, bad hips or something. It's you've been carrying too much weight on your bones. Therefore, and I just think there's so much of life that's like that there just is a reality. And when we try to make reality in our own image, there's going to be consequences.
Yeah.
It's not a hammer coming down on you. It's
No, you're right.
The way it is.
Yeah, you have to be in harmony with the natural order of things, otherwise things are going to fall apart.
Yeah.
And I think that something like, to go into weight and food and all that stuff, I mean, on a, on a macro scale, you've got a system that is much more interested, that is not interested in nourishing its public.
Mm-hmm.
Learned how to add vitamins to food so you don't have vitamin deficiency. And you can take those those artificial vitamins, and put them in all these horrible corn-based products that is the sum total, that's like probably 40% of the food produced is corn-based, genetically modified. And it's like these highly profitable products. And then you see the health of the population begin to fall apart because of that. And then so they fix that with more products, pharmaceutical products, and you see
Mm-hmm.
this giant mess.
Yeah, I mean, it's a giant market for sure.
Yeah, but
Right.
when it comes to like our actual biological relationship with the origin of our, of who we are with the earth, there's all this stuff in between that now.
Mm-hmm.
There's us going and being hunter gatherers, I suppose, would be the earliest example of that. To now, where you've got all these layers of product in between the earth and you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so there's this up here is just going to have so many side effects that constantly have to be fixed with something else that's going to have a side effect, rather than that, the natural relationship that we once had.
Well, but I can speak as one with authority that even when, and I do generally try to eat as close to the earth as I can. I don't shop the inner section of the store. I only shop around the perimeter, which is
Oh,
the
yeah,
fresh
yeah.
vegetables,
Yeah,
right,
yeah.
and um the organic meat, and no hormones, and I try as much as possible to get natural foods and eat those natural foods. Guess what? Even when you're eating the right stuff, you can still abuse your body by eating too much of the right stuff, because I can always convince myself, well, this little bit won't hurt, or a
Uh-huh.
little extra ounce of meat there, whatever, or I don't need to weigh that because I
Yeah.
know how much this is. And so I'm using this as an example, not to just point at my own stuff, but I'm saying
No.
this kind of thing can happen in any part of life
Mhm.
where it's possible to make excuses about everything.
Yeah.
Oh, I heard this great line the other day. There's a couple of people that I talk to offline that we never record because they don't like to record, but he made this statement that philosophy is a marketplace for excuses. And I thought that was so good,
That's really funny.
because it's true. If you want to live a world of excuses instead of a world of responsibility, you just go find the right philosopher, or
That's right.
pick
Yeah.
here and there from different philosophers that will
Oh, yeah.
support your position, right? So, because I am a sinner, Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on me, a sinner.
Mhm.
And it permeates every single layer. And that, again, that the word sinner doesn't mean what people think it means.
Yeah.
You know, what
It's
it
that
means
being
is
out of,
missing the mark, just
yeah,
missing the
yeah.
mark. And when we continually miss the mark, we're getting closer and closer to the place that the whole society is covered by the flood.
Yeah, yeah, totally. Yeah, more and more out of harmony, more following the wrong, that's what Jonathan would say, following the wrong, follow, like what is at the top of the hierarchy in that case is not the right top.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the
Yeah,
right
not the
entity
right
to follow.
spirit.
Yep.
Um, so I don't know if you saw that tweet that Matthew Peugeot put out today about the story about the king with the mirror.
No, I haven't looked at Twitter today, but tell me.
Um, I'll see if I can copy paste it maybe into the
Okay.
um well, he was saying that there was something he wanted to talk to us about, but he'd been getting so many attacks from other people whenever he
Mhm.
approaches that topic that he
Mhm.
feels like maybe there's something more underneath that he needs to investigate.
That's
And
interesting.
so before he's going to come out publicly with his thoughts, he wants to spend some more time in reflection and contemplation.
This is his King David project, right?
Well, I don't know, but in this particular tweet, he made that statement that I just said, and then he posted a story about a king,
Uh-huh.
um, an evil king, an inverted king, who took all his wealth and turned it into the most highly polished gold mirror that he could create. And then that mirror was used as a way to capture everybody.
Right.
So there's no way to defeat the king, because every time people would come into his presence, they'd see their reflection in the mirror and they'd get so captivated by their reflection in the mirror. Or they would be so afraid that the mirror would expose their hidden desires
Uh-huh.
that they would give in to the king.
Uh-huh.
And then the question at the end is, if you reveal your light and then your light is captured by the mirror, if you don't reveal your light, then you are captured by the mirror, then how can you overcome such a king? So it's a riddle,
Yeah.
it's a story, and I'm sure it's probably like a Zen koan. He's probably trying
Yeah.
to get us
Let,
thinking about what that means.
let me read that last line because I found it here. How can the fallen king be defeated? When you withhold your light, you cannot use it. But when you reveal it, the mirror steals it.
Yeah, yeah, there you go. I didn't have it quite right. When you withhold your light, you cannot use it. So if your light is covered with a bushel basket, it's useless.
Uh-huh.
But if you reveal your light and the mirror steals it, there's a couple of verses that come to mind when I think about that. One is that um, it talks about how we are like those who look into a mirror, look intently into a mirror and then walk away and forget what it was that we saw.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of levels to that. Another one is talking about the eye being the lamp of the body, then therefore, if the light that is in you is darkness, what's the rest of that verse? Anyway, the idea is that if you're taking in what you think is light, but if what you're taking in is darkness, really, then you have no light within. But the way to have the light within is to be completely open about, not to have any hidden desires, I think would be the thing, because it's the hidden desires that bankrupt these people, right?
Well,
So
I think you're talking about the lens you see things through, right? I mean, if
yeah,
you see things through a distorted dark lens, things will seem bad and negative.
well, yeah, I think that's a different verse. Let me see if I can find it. So it's lamp of the body in the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus Christ. Okay, Matthew 6:22-23. The eye is the lamp of the body. If your eyes are good, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eyes are bad, your whole body will be full of darkness. Well, I guess that would be if you're looking through a
Yeah.
darkened lens, you're going to see darkness.
Yeah.
But then the verse I was thinking of is, if then the light within you is darkness, how great is that darkness? Um, so if the light within you is darkness, how great then is that darkness? So if all we ever take in is the negative, then there's no light to be gotten. That's
Yeah.
one aspect of it. But I also think the other thing he's talking about with that story is that we can be controlled if we have hidden desires because we're afraid that those hidden desires will be exposed. It's the same way that blackmailers get by with controlling people, right?
Well, what would be then that's a very good point. What would be how to deal with the fallen king? How would you deal with the blackmailer?
Well, I think the story has to be, and I don't even know how this is possible, but the story has to be that there's nothing about you. Number one, if you went the ascetic route, there would be nothing about you that anybody could blackmail you for.
Yeah.
But if you already have stuff in your past, like people who have
Uh-huh.
social media accounts and there's stuff
Yeah. Yeah.
lurking in the past and all of that, you have to come to a place of such courage
Yeah.
that it doesn't matter what is exposed. You're
That's
not
right.
going to allow that to control you,
That's right. I
right?
think that's exactly it. I think that's exactly right. You are accepting of your sins and failures, and
Mhm.
you stand up to them, and you like you said, the word is courage. You have the courage to withstand what people have to say about that stuff,
Yeah.
and be, where you are now is what counts.
And even if where we are now is not perfect, we still, at some point, I think this trust thing has to come into it. This
That's right.
that
Yeah.
I'm trusting that God is good and that no matter what comes of this, I have to be, I mean, the modern word is transparent. And so
Yeah.
that's,
Well, that's truthful
maybe
with
that's too much
yourself.
of a cliche, but there is something about it. If you're transparent, the mirror can't capture you.
If you're truthful with yourself, if
Yes.
you understand, and even if you've done bad things in the past, the mirror is going to capture you. You take responsibility for your past, and you resolve, and that's what forgiveness is about, right? You
Right.
resolve to learn from this and be better in the future. There's a whole lot of ways of putting this, but
Hmm.
I think that makes sense, and it's also the whole stance that we're talking about in this little corner.
That was very important for you at Chino, was to try to determine the stance. Could you
Yeah.
talk about that a little bit?
Well, I think the stance is kind of what you're talking about. It's like having the light. It's opening your eyes so that the light comes in. It's to be. It's unintentional. It's unconditional positive regard. It's the vibe that was at Chino. It's like being in the room with people and trusting them, and and the trusting that following your conscience and following God, let's say, will lead you in the right direction versus believing what you're told.
Hmm. Yeah, I think that conscience has to be guided by um, it is perfectly possible for a person to have a conscience that's not guided by truth,
Totally. I think that's right. So
right? So,
you
so
always
this is
attempt.
where I think the word comes
Yeah,
in because
yeah,
because we have the word, and what many people often do is they take one little passage of scripture and then they make that their centerpiece, but you cannot take any part of the scripture out of the context of the whole. So when you do that without recognizing how it fits into the whole and all the other things that are said that are adjacent to that,
mhm,
then you can easily get misled and you can get a conscience that gets twisted. You were talking about children who are pushed into doing things because of the fears of the parents, then that creates in the child a conscience that it can be um, overly self-critical and damaging,
Yeah.
right? And so then that's still a conscience, but it's going to lead you in the wrong direction. So the conscience has to be balanced with what the guidance of the word says,
Yeah.
and not the word as it has been twisted by some
That's right.
leaders who choose to use the word for their own purposes, who have their own hidden desires, like the people who are trapped by the mirror, right?
Yeah.
But it has to be people who have a desire to understand the whole word and be honest about it and ask honest questions and really understand, to see the word as fundamentally good and trustworthy. And then, yeah, I mean, these things are complicated.
Yeah.
It would be so
But
nice to
it's
be able to
also like,
simplify it down, and make it easy to.
but it's also like you said, having the courage to accept what the mirror reflects back to you, and
Mhm.
to commit to fixing that, or not, or going forward to not allow that to continue,
Mm.
whatever way that is. I mean, if you learn that your parents, that you've got some old patterns that your parents have put on you, and if you feel like it's dangerous to let those patterns go, you kind of have to work on, like you said, getting a better framework so where you can let those patterns go. So it's really, a lot of it's about not allowing, a lot of it is about letting your ego go, like you said, humility.
Mhm.
And the stance is one of letting your ego go when it needs to,
Yeah. Yeah.
because you're not going to make these changes if they're damaging to your ego. If you can't stand seeing what's reflected back to you in the mirror, then you're not going to make the changes.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I don't know how it is for other people, but for me, I usually sleep pretty well. And even when I wake up in the middle of the night, I can get back to sleep. But when on the nights when I can't get back to sleep, it's because some regret has been brought back into my memory of something from the past that I've done that I know very well has damaged people. And then it's so easy to get trapped in that and feel like I can't fix that
Mhm.
because it happened, and
Mhm.
it's past. And um but then ultimately the only way that I can handle that is to come back to the place of remembering, yeah, I can't fix that. I'm not God, but there is one who is, and he can.
Yeah.
And he loves that person even more than I do.
Mhm.
And he is willing and able not only to restore the years that the locusts have eaten, but to make something beautiful out of that
Mhm.
for his greater purpose, whatever that is. There's this old song we used to sing, something beautiful, something good. All my confusion, he understood. Um, I can't remember the end of it. If I had been singing it, I would have remembered the end of it, but I'm not going to sing online. So, but anyway, the song is just something beautiful, and really, he can make something beautiful out of the broken pieces of our past, and that is what allows me to sleep again.
I think that's right. You
Yeah.
you take responsibility, but you forgive yourself because he forgives you.
Yeah. I mean, well, what other path is there to get forward? I mean,
There isn't.
if you get trapped in those regrets of the past, then maybe that's what the mirror is,
I think so. And
right?
also, yeah, I think that's right. And also, then that you're also, like, to dwell on the bad things you did is also giving into your ego.
Yes. Yes. It's
It's
giving
saying,
too much
oh,
power to
too
your.
much power to your and this is really, it's kind of a catch-22. It's giving too much power to your regret.
Mm-hmm.
It's like there's almost a self-indulgence to regret that doesn't allow you to go forward and do good in the world
Mm-hmm.
because you're feeling sorry for yourself that you did this bad thing.
Yeah. Yeah. That reminds me of this. One time I was really struggling with something with it was probably some attitude I was having that I was struggling with, and knowing that I was in the wrong place. And I called up one of the women in my small group who was more mature than I was. And I was just, kind of crying and saying, I know I should be better. And she said, who do you think you are to think that you should be better? Said, you're just like the rest of us.
That's funny.
Yeah.
That's
Because if I always knew the right thing to do, then I would be saying that I'm God.
Yeah.
And I'm not. Now, that's not to excuse making mistakes or having wrong attitudes or whatever. But sometimes even when I believe I'm doing the absolute right thing, and this is what I feel I'm called to do, and I really believe I'm doing the right thing, and it turns out to have this destructive impact.
Yeah.
What do I do with that? So either I'm God and I have all the answers, or I'm not and I don't, and I know which one I'm going to fall into, right? I am not and I don't, but I know the one who does, and I can trust him, so that all I can do is try to do the right thing. And if I do the wrong thing, then I have to trust that somehow he has a way out of that for me.
Yeah.
Right.
And that you learn from that.
Yes.
That's the way out for you.
Yeah. Well, I didn't mean to use up your therapy time with my own issues, but it's nice to get your wisdom on this stuff. And
well, it's really nice to talk to you and catch up.
Yeah. So what do you have plans for the summer?
Do I have plans for summer? Not really. You're going to Hawaii?
We are going to Hawaii as a family next week, and really looking forward to that.
Good.
Just have relaxing time together. My husband works long hours, many days, and it's fun to watch him relax. Although usually it takes him almost the whole week of the vacation to get relaxed.
Do you think he'll stay away from his work?
Most of the time he does, although Good. He doesn't like to see things fall apart.
Yeah.
Fall through the cracks. And so if he sees things starting to fall apart, he'll jump in a little bit and say, hey, remember that thing over there. Yeah. So, I've gotten used to it. Part of living in Silicon Valley is that I think you have to learn to balance your life. So because they're communicating with people from all over the planet all the time.
Yeah.
If he's talking to India or Europe or China or Australia or Israel, it's all different time zones. Mm-hmm. So occasionally he'll have to take a call at 5:30 a.m. Occasionally he'll have to take a call at 8:30 at night.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So he's found a way to integrate life into his day so that he's not working from 5:30 a.m. to 8:30 at night, but he's, once in a while he can take a break and go do something, spend time with me, integrate life into the workday, and then integrate a little bit of work into the life days.
Yeah, makes
right.
Sense. Yeah.
And it works for us, and it's not been a burden, but it does allow him to excel in what he does, and I like to see that. Right.
For sure.
Yeah. So it's all good.
All right. We'll have a great time in Hawaii then. I'm glad your daughter's going with you.
Yeah. And
so let's catch
up. I hope you have a summer in DC that's not too hot. My recollection of DC in the summer is pretty grueling.
Yeah, it can be bad. Right now I'm in Maryland, but I'll be in DC in a couple of weeks.
Okay.
Yeah, but the weather's the same. So yeah, no big plans. So maybe go to the beach at the end of the summer.
So what are you doing with your channel these days?
Not much.
Not because you're done with Persig. You're just
No,
taking a break.
I put stuff on. I talked about the stance a little bit, so I put a few videos on.
Mm-hmm.
But no, I'm not done talking about Persic. He's always part of the mix.
I
I'm,
noticed you tweeted out something yesterday.
oh yeah. I was rereading Persic, which I tend to do.
Uh-huh.
And then, if it's an electronic book, which it was, I can cut and paste. So I do that.
And what you put out there was that everybody is always striving towards quality,
Yeah,
or there's a natural desire to strive
yeah,
towards quality. And so I made the comment, I said, unless you're one of the powers that be in the silo. Did you
yeah.
know what I was talking about?
And like the people who are sort of in control.
Well, no, there's a TV, there's a new series on Apple
Oh
Plus.
no, I didn't. I thought it was
There's a
the.
new series on Apple Plus called The Silo.
Oh, okay. No, I didn't know what you're talking
Absolutely fascinating and
about.
filled with all sorts of symbolic stuff that
Mm,
is so much under the surface that it's really kind of hard to understand what they're getting at, but endlessly fascinating. And the leaders of the silo really don't want people to excel,
mhm,
which um when you look at that, you have to think, what on earth could be their motivation for not wanting. I mean, it becomes very obvious when you watch people who are trying to prevent advancements and prevent progress. What could be the motivation for that? You know, if there's a natural desire to strive for quality, then when that natural desire is allowed to flourish in individuals, then the quality rises to the surface and you keep getting more and more quality, right? Isn't that the way it should work? Is that what Persig is talking about?
I it's like we'd have to do another in a way.
In a way. Okay. Well, that makes so anyway, I think that there again, this whole voluntary thing is what comes
Yeah,
into play.
yeah,
And so if people are going to move towards quality, there needs to be a voluntary ability to do that.
yeah. I think that's right.
Yeah. So, well, I won't steal your thunder then. You can talk about that on your channel. But
Well, I'd have to think about it a little
yeah,
bit.
but I am recommending that if anybody gets a chance to watch The Silo on Apple Plus, and I'm not getting a cut from Apple on this.
That's
It's
funny.
just I watch it with my daughter. We watch it online together, even though
Oh,
she's in
that's
another
brilliant.
city.
Yeah.
And so we can talk to each other while it's going on. And it's like, what? He did what? What was he doing? Why? So yeah, it's really good. It's about some dystopian future where the only supposedly the only 10,000 people left on Earth are living in this silo that's down underground.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just so endlessly fascinating. Well, anyway, I've talked enough. It was good seeing you, Sevilla.
Very great to
Uh,
see. Let's do it again next month.
yes. Okay. That sounds really good. July.
Yeah.
Yeah. My 75th birthday is coming up next month.
Hard to believe.
I have to think about some kind of celebration for that. I'll tell you this, since I joined this little corner, I feel 20 years younger. So,
Well, you look 20 years younger and you act 20 years younger in a good way. So,
so do you.
all
Have a great day.
right, Karen, you take
Yeah.
care.
Bye bye.